Hi, I'm Diehold from the Diehold Foundation. It's July 22nd, 2023, and I'm going to cover a lot of stuff in this, including the next expedition to the Sinai, which some of you might be able to go. I'm going to cover Moses before the Exodus, the Pharaoh at the time of the Exodus, which is the real Mount Sinai. I'm going to show the two alternates, and you'll see how ridiculous it is and why they thought this indicates they're very bad scholars, or they just guessed. The real Mount Sinai and the last expedition, you'll see the altars there, that some of you might wind up seeing in person. There were 12 commandments, not 10. I'm not kidding, and you'll see what it revealed. When was the first two stone tablets created? Why Korah rebelled against Moses and Aaron. The future expedition of the real Mount Sinai. That'll be the end of the video. So, this is where this information comes from. And this is very important. You can't decipher and decode the Torah and some of the later prophets without Moses' 10 code systems. Otherwise, it's pointless. You'll never figure it out. And this is the last book. It's basically, the important lesson you're going to learn here is that a lie is a terrible thing and has consequences 1,000+ years after the lie was created. Anyway, regarding the part one, and I covered Abraham, one of my fans, Kelly, wrote me this letter. And by the way, I appreciate people. You have a right to criticize me and voice your opinion. I allow it. That's how science is done. But anyway, he said, denigrating the great prophet Abraham is reprehensible. What he didn't understand, or he didn't think about, by the way, I did answer him, is this. You can't take the man out of the history and the time he lived. For starters, there's no question he sold his wife twice and got a lot of money, first from the Pharaoh and the king of Gerar, Ahimelech. You can't deny it because Moses tells us that. The other part you have to realize is, ask yourself, why did Terah force Abraham? His first name was Abram, before it was changed to Abraham. Force him to marry his sister. Every parent with daughters and sons, you come home and you see your son screwing the half-sister or sister, what are you going to do? In Terah's case, he said, you're going to marry her now. And that's what happened. That's why he had two cuneiforms. One that said she was a sister, and the other one said, she's my wife. And they did this scam, both of them. You can't deny it. To the Pharaoh of Egypt, as well as King Ahimelech. You have to understand, in fact, with King Ahimelech, he winds up telling, Ahimelech winds up telling the woman, Abraham's wife, that I gave your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Now you know how he had the 400 pieces of silver to buy the cave, the mountain, and some of the land around it. Now you know. He was running a scam. But this may have been par for the course of the culture he came out of. And that's what he doesn't really understand. None of these people, including Moses, were holier than thou. They were just like us, with a culture that was a lot worse than us, we think. Now we'll cover Moses before the Exodus. Who was he? Where he came from? Age and stuff like that. Moses was born, I calculated, 1387 BCE. He was 80 years old when the time of the Exodus. The same year that Tutmosis IV died. That is who Moses was named after, not because he was drawn out of the water. It was no coincidence that the founder of the 18th dynasty was called Moses. Many of the descendants were called Tutmosis. It was no accident that the Pharaoh's daughter raised him. It was because she knew he was in the royal line. Remember, Tutmosis III's wife was Joseph's daughter to Hatshepsut. So they knew they had a Hebe in the woodpile. Anyway, the Pharaoh's daughter drew him out of the water. It was more important to figure out who he was related to. Okay, this is where I can't call it anything other than a lie, and Moses owns it. Exodus 2:1, there went a man of the house of Levi and took a wife, a daughter of Levi. Well, that's impossible. Levi was like 150 or 200 years before. Actually, I take that. He was the older brother of Jacob, so take it from there. Anyway, this is the word Levi in Hebrew. Shows up quite a few times. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, is there not Aaron thy brother, the Levite? I know that he can speak well. It's because Moses stuttered, and that's important for what you're about to see soon. This is Moses' kids. His oldest was Gershom, with an M, and Eliezer. This is the younger. His son was Nun. Osea was Joshua. Joshua was more like a nickname. The Torah listed the word Nun no less than 12 times, just to make sure you notice, and mention him as an Ephraimite. They want to make sure you know he's an Ephraimite. The name means drawn out of the water. The word Nun means fish. What do you draw out of the water? Why, it's fish. This is how subtle Moses connected him with his grandson Nun. Remember, Moses had total control over the words and what they mean, and basically the dictionary, the first dictionary. Anyway, Eliashima, the son of Ammihud, this is from one of the legends, son of Ammihud, the name of the prince of the tribe of Ephraim, points to the history of Joseph, goes on, not covet his master's wife, to sin him, and Ammihud, he honored and none else. So you have to first take the name Ammihud apart, and the first part of this is the word here in Hebrew. First part of the words means besides. Yod-He is a shortened version for God. The long version, Yod-He Vav-He. The next part of the word means splendor or majesty. If you add the He, it means confess or confession. Now, when you put the whole thing together, beside God, confession. So the only one who sat next to God in the tabernacle in front of the ark was Moses. So, and what is he confessing? Basically what his family, the Ephraimites and Joseph, did. He was put in a very bad position. You'll find out why. Numbers 1:10. Of the children of Joseph, Ephraim, Eliashima, that's his younger son, Eliezer. Changes it to Eliashima, son of Ammihud. And this is how many times son of Ammihud shows up for Eliashima. But it's his younger son. He's admitting he's an Ephraimite. There's no way around it. They are Ephraimites, and he's confessing it here. But it's all in code. You have to know Moses' code system. Otherwise, forget it. You'll never figure this stuff out. And believe me, they didn't. Except the first temple people, they did know it. The standard of the camp of the children of Ephraim set forward according to their host, the host of Eliashima, the son of Ammihud. He repeats it enough times just to make sure you notice. This is the real family tree of Levi. He only saw his grandchildren. That was as far as it went. Everything else is, they appended the Ephraimites onto his family tree. Now, Gershon, that's mentioned 17 times in number. But one of the code systems that Moses used is adjacent letter swaps. He first does this and plainly tells you, when Jacob blesses Ephraim, because he knew, and that was the younger, because he knew that Abraham bought the cave from Ephron, the Hittite. So you're basically saying, I know what you did. You put the gold in the family burial cave that we bought from Ephron, and you called your son Ephraim. So adjacent letter swaps is common here. So really when it says Gershon, it really means his older son, Gershom. See, this is Gershon, Levi's older son. Anyway, goes on. This is how you wind up figuring this stuff out. Family of the Gershonites were pitched behind the tabernacle westward. And the charge of the sons of Gershon in the tent of the meeting, and the tent covering thereof, and the screen thereof, of the door of the tent of meeting. Gershon, Moses' oldest son, is only mentioned twice in the entire Torah, and Eliezer is only mentioned once, which should be a red flag for everybody. Why is he only mentioning his own sons twice and once? This is a reconstruction by an artist of Tanis. The Pharaoh would live in this compound, and all his extended relatives were in the same compound, maybe out here also. But that's why it says Moses was raised in the household of the Pharaoh. And I bet anything that his brother was also raised there, and the whole family was in there. This is what Tanis looks like today. This is the site of it. There was a river that ran through here. Now it's over here. Okay. Exodus 2:12. We learn that Moses murdered an Egyptian. We are told only that the Egyptian struck the Hebrew, and the reasons given us do not make any sense. Just because you see someone hitting somebody else, you don't kill them. I mean, they're in the household of the Pharaoh, so the Egyptian they probably killed was maybe the Pharaoh's son, nephew, grandson. You don't know. But the real reason No, this is in Exodus chapter 2. But he gives the reason why in the same chapter in the name of his wife, Zipporah. You take the word apart, and the first three letters, to conceal or hidden, and another similar spelling would be this, which means crown or turn of fate. Another part of the word, Yahur, means fear or tremble. When you put the whole thing together, to fear, he feared the Pharaoh because of the hidden treasure. Maybe this Egyptian boy overheard them talking about the cave and the treasure inside, the gold and silver. And they felt they had to go on killing them. So they killed him. Now, Moses is the younger. He was going to eventually be the high priest of Hathor, like his father was, and his father. So Amram, I bet anything, Moses may be 18, 20 years old, told Moses to go murder the Egyptian. That's the position he was put in. Not a very good position. That's why he couldn't stand Egypt any longer. He didn't like his family either. Anyway, so he escapes, spends 60 years a herdsman in Midian. Now, I know for a fact from the Egyptians, they all had a site on this side also. And Moses would take his cattle and stuff like that, sheep, and went up towards Sinai, the real Sinai, not this one down here. And he would wind up grazing his sheep. Sometimes, I don't think all the time, because it's a long journey. And he would graze the sheep, and they would give birth to their lambs around March, a little bit in April, and then when they became 15 pounds or big enough, then he'd walk them out. Anyway, in one of these trips, he goes deep in the cave. He winds up seeing a hologram of God's presence, and that's where the story gets interesting. So he's told what to do. He's going to go into Egypt. So he goes back to Midian here and winds up taking his wife and his two kids. And he has to go back to the real Mount Sinai, the cave. Why? He's going into civilization. He needs money. He knows where to get some. So he goes back to the cave, and lo and behold, by sheer coincidence, he meets his brother there. Why? Because the brother needs some walking around money too. So they meet there, and by the way, that's the only explanation you can come up with of why Moses has to go back to Mount Sinai and then go into Egypt a second time. He could have taken a boat trip around Sinai and a lot easier. But he didn't. So they all pick up some money, they go back into Egypt. This is the Pharaoh at the time of the Exodus. I don't know why alleged scholars can't figure this one out. Remember, I said earlier that Moses stuttered. There was a reason why it's put in there. His original name was Amenhotep IV. After the splitting of the Red Sea and he saw his cavalry drown, he had a change of heart, and he changed his name to Akhenaten. Now, this is the reason why he changed it to this. The first part of the word, Agnatin, up to the end, means servant of. Atone, the Hebrew word for God is Adonai. So if he started, he would have paused after this N. So Akhenaten, or Amenhotep, thought the name of Moses' God was Adon. Now, the D and the T are interchangeable. There is examples of cities and towns where you can swap the D with the T because they sound alike. So Agnaten means the servant of Aton. And what's further, remember in the Exodus that they left, where the granary, where they emptied it, at Sukkot, there was a pillar of smoke by daytime to lead them, and a pillar of fire by night. So we have a big red thing here. There's Agnaten, and the rays of whatever coming down. We have quite a few frescoes of and carvings of him doing this. This is his wife. She was gorgeous. Now, he had a elongated face. It's called a horse face. He had Marfan syndrome. And there's a Jewish legend about the Pharaoh at the time that a horse landed on the Pharaoh's face. So that's how they remembered it. He had a horse face. It is Akhenaten, or Amenhotep, who was the Pharaoh at the time. I don't know why alleged scholars couldn't connect this and figure it out. It was so obvious. Now to the real Mount Sinai. What is the real Mount Sinai? Now, I had figured out what the length of a sacred cubit is. One sacred cubit is 24.136 inches. I explained it in video series 6, I think part 2 or 3, where I figured out the length of a sacred cubit. And it's only because Baruch, writing as Ezekiel, told us it's a cubit and a handbreadth. But nobody realized it was a Egyptian royal cubit and a handbreadth. Anyway, I figured it out. It's in that video, and it's also in the book, Moses 10 Code Systems. Anyway, the tent of meeting was 100 cubits or 201 feet. Half of that is where the sacrificial altar was. Half of that, which would have been 25 sacred cubits, exactly this is where I found the platform where the ark was. And half of 25 feet is 12 and a half, sacred cubits. It comes out to 25 feet. And exactly I found what's left of the bread stand and what's left of the candle stand. Now, all the pictures I've seen of the tabernacle, this tilt-up building, shows the bread stand and the candle stand inside. It wasn't. It was outside. They should have been able to figure this sucker out. So the tabernacle was 15 cubits, about 30 feet by 60 feet. Remember that. Now, this is what they attribute to be Mount Sinai. Now, it was a result of, I think it was Emperor Constantine, either his wife or his mother, decided the tallest mountain there was going to be it. Now, there's not a flat area here, even to build an outhouse. More or less, the tabernacle is 60 feet. There's no way. So right off the bat, you know, it can't be this. This is the other location from what that somebody says is in Saudi Arabia. This is what it looks like. There is no room to put even a lean-to or an outhouse, more or less 60 feet by 30 feet. This is obviously ridiculous. Now, why they did this gives you an idea immediately. This is the map that they created. Marsh, these are the names that appear in the Torah, in the Exodus. Elam, wilderness of Sin, Raphidim, and Mount Sinai. Imagine this path it take. This would have taken more than 59 days for them to go from Goshen to here. Now I'm going to destroy what he put down, and you can guess what he's been doing. After they crossed, the crossing was down here. This is the 12 wells of Moses. And again, video series 10 shows them, and the book shows them. Was there. It's called Ayum Musa, the wells of Moses. And the Torah says, spent the first day to go to Baal-zephon, spent the time to get the gold out of the spent gold mine, which I showed. Then he went to the wells of Marsh, which you're going to see in a second, and then back to here, and then they took the journey. This is the wells of Marsh. There it is. And here's the two wells. There's another one there too. I didn't try the water. Some of these are actually dry. So this is where the Ayum Musa is. This is where Aaron built an obelisk to commemorate the crossing while Moses went up to Baal-zephon. So they went down. This whole area is called the Wilderness of Sin. Their encampment on October 23rd was called Elam, by the coast. Now, then this is what I calculated where the first Shabbos or Sabbath was celebrated on October 25th to 26th. There's two passes that go into the Sinai. One north of what's now Suez City, and this one. Now, regarding Sin, see that mountain range down here? Called Sin Beshur. S-I-N-N. You want to know the wilderness of Sin? There it is. It's here as because of that mountain. Now, what's highlighted here are wells that travelers dug every, basically one walking day as it goes up the pass. Now, what they left off totally and ignored was the battle with Melech. Melech means salt. On my 2002 expedition with my son, I found it. And where we parked the Jeep, there were salt crystals that were basically bubbling up from the ground where we parked the car, the Jeep. But that's where it is. And this is where the Battle of Melech was. And I showed it in my book, Volume 3. And I think I showed it in the video also. So this is where it is. The people who say that Saudi Arabia is where the real Mount Sinai is, in my humble opinion, they're blatantly making this stuff up to fool people so they can make some money. But in my opinion, they have no idea what the truth is. They're just guessing. So much for scholarship. Now, I'm 75 years old. More importantly, we only have 23 years left before this polar reversal. And it's about time that everybody know that there was actually a real Mount Sinai. Moses existed. He lived. He's not a fictional person. and what really happened there. And so I want to take it out of the realm of myth. Academia and the Jewish Reform movement started in the 19th century in Germany. They don't believe it. They don't believe it. They think the Torah was written over 700 years and finished by Jeremiah. They're such scholars. They didn't know Jeremiah's given name was Shaphan. He was the scribe who, after they found Deuteronomy in the temple, after they opened it up, and they found it, he did the translation as best he could. But none of these great scholars ever bothered to figure out that all these priests had three names: a given name at birth, a priestly name, and then finally, if they stood in front of the ark, a prophet's name. That's what Volume 4 is all about. As far as I know, I'm the only one who's figured out all of them, what their names really were. But these are, I'm planning another expedition to the real Mount Sinai and take some of the people, my fans and others who are interested, to go there and see it for themselves. If I can prove it to the Egyptian Antiquities Board and Tourism Board, it would be the second biggest attraction for them. And it's fairly easy to get to. But that's my intent of doing it now. Basically, man is running out of time. These are the altars in the order they were built. Now, in the second expedition, taking the clues that Moses left, he implied basically the technique he would use: if A is equal to B and B is equal to C, therefore A is equal to C. And that's what he did here. So he was saying basically Abraham's altar is at the real Mount Sinai. What Moses did, he built his sacrificial altar over Abraham's. I dug a slit trench on the west-hand side, and lo and behold, I was the first one in probably 3,320 years that laid eyes on the real Abraham's altar. I took a picture of it. Now all of you can see it. Now, this is the order of which the altars were created. And if you go to you want to go on the expedition and you have the money to go, this is what you're going to see. I'll later show Aaron's altar, the encampment where the Ephraimites were. It's over this ridge, actually. And this is the first altar Moses created. Here's the excerpt for it. Exodus 20:21. An altar of earth thou shalt make unto me, and thou shalt sacrifice thereon thy burnt offerings. 24:4. And Moses wrote all the words of the God, and rose up early in the morning and built an altar under the mount. It's located in the western end of the hill. And that's what I first saw when I went there. I knew it was artificial. I just had to excavate it. It was the only earthen one I ever found. Now, 24:4, and Moses took the road, blah, 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 and 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. This is the picture I took in 1997. 1999 I took, this is Frank, he's a PhD in sedimentology. This is Larry Israel, he's a geologist graduate from Colorado School of Mines. I had them go through and I left them alone, and wanted to see if they saw the 12 piles also. Now I showed this in the whole thing in the book, volume 3, but this is an example. This is number 9. They wrote it on a rock in a magic marker. 10, 11, 12. They concurred what I found. By the way, these are lines we segment and graph this thing off. Now, these are the other altars. I found all of them except this was a movable one, so this is not there. But sacrificial, the platform where the ark was. Now immediately you see, this is the top of the hill. You immediately see it's fairly, somewhat flat. Certainly flat enough you can have the tent of meeting and the tabernacle 60 feet by 30 feet wide, or 201 feet by 100 feet. No problem. This is my first view. That's his sacrificial altar. This is where the ark was. And if thou make me an altar of stone, thou shalt not build it of hewn stone. For if thou lift up thy tool upon it, thou hast profaned it. So I think he did it also be, you see a bunch of rocks like this, chances are it would still exist because nobody would think anything of it. Here's the ramp, by the way. And it says it, neither thou shalt go up by steps unto my altar, that thy nakedness not be uncovered. So here's the ramp. I found this in the first expedition, about 12 degrees. The book shows many more pictures and the graph of what this thing looked like finally. But this is what's left of the bread stand. It was 12.5 sacred cubits, or 25 feet. And the same thing goes to the candle stand. It was equidistant. These two things, obviously, there is no question that this is the real Mount Sinai, and these are the altars. Not the frauds you saw earlier. This is the real place. It actually happened. For those who think they're great scholars and rabbis in the Reform movement, I'll tell you the story. After in December of 1999, we got back from the expedition, and we had a news conference, and we sent it off to the news media there. A guy from Reuters showed up. This is in LA. And I said, and he saw the presentation of all the altars and stuff like that, and the explanations. And he called up a Reform rabbi. I think it was in Montreal. I know it was in Canada. And what did the Reform rabbi say? It's impossible. It cannot be. They don't believe in anything. They have a good business. Why ruin it? They don't believe in anything. That's my experience with the Reform movement, even though I was bar mitzvahed in one. But this is before Saperstein took it over in the 60s. That's me. This is what the sacrificial altar looks like. That's me at 40 years old with dark hair. Oh, I'm sorry, 50 years old. Anyway, inside this is Abraham's real altar. I cut the slit trench on this side. That's the west side. This is Aaron's altar. The lines are we gridded off. I think it was every 2 feet. And this is where the remains of the platform where the golden calf was. Now, I'll explain what they do with these rocks and what this lighter soil is. They would make a border of rock, and then they would put dirt or clay from the river in there and pack it down and make it smooth. That seems to be what they're doing. Mount Sinai, every one of these names, when you take them apart, have something to do with Mount Sinai or the treasure inside, or them talking to God or learning from God. But notice, Ephraim and the Levites are in the same location. How do you like that? Gee, how could I possibly guess that one? The only place in the Torah that says the words or the 10 words is derived from 2 verses in Deuteronomy. This is probably what threw them off. And they didn't think about this. It's also a condemnation. They didn't really understand or believe what really happened in the Exodus. In Deuteronomy 4:13, he is telling you, you covenant of him. Oh, this is a literal translation. Instructing you to do 10 of the words. He is writing them 2 tablets of stone. Deuteronomy 10:4, and it goes, writing the tablets as written the first 10 of the words which he spoke Yahweh to you in mountain from midst of the fire in the day of the assembly. This is the key part here. He is giving them Yahweh to me. Now, why they forgot about this, I don't know. You'll have to make your own determinations. This is Eastern Orthodox, Philo, 1st century Reformed Christians. That's the code up here. Jewish Talmud, notice it's 5 to 600, they finally decided on 10. And this is the key one. Augustine, 4th century, find the word order of Deuteronomy 5, 6 through 17, rather than Exodus 20, 17. Roman Catholic Church followed Augustine for obvious reasons. But they all know, here's the commands. There are 12, but they grouped them differently to make them because of those 2 earlier statements in Deuteronomy. These are the words Yahweh spoke unto your assembly in the mount, out of the midst of the fire, the cloud and the thick darkness, with a great voice, and it came no more. And he wrote them upon 2 tablets of stone and gave them unto you. This event happened the first month they arrived at the real Mount Sinai. That's when this thing happened. Not a year later. That's the first set of tablets. So, I went to what Augustine listed, Deuteronomy chapter 5, verses 6 through 17. It's only a total of 708 letters. That's all. Not, the Torah has 304,805 letters or symbols. Now, Moses did this, so you had a hash total. You knew exactly how many letters were in the Torah. You double this number because a couple of the stories, including the 10 Commandments, are mentioned twice. 409,610. This was interesting. The never males who left Egypt was 603,550. Do not take this number literally. What is the number made up of? 50 times 12,068 is 602,500, or 3,400 as I remember. So I had 150 left over. Where did he get the 150? Then the unspoken name of God is Yod He Vav He. He was using cumulative small numbering. The Romans used that too. That was 150, making a total of 603,550. Number of chapters and verses in the Torah is 6,034. Gee, that's half the 12,068. The number of letters in the titles is 26. Gives you the same number. It's a hash total. I think I'm the only one who's ever discovered that. The following is the correct sequence of events that happened at Sinai. Hebrew month of Abib was 1306 BCE. That was the first month, which should have started August 28, 1306 BCE. The full moon was September 11th. They started their exodus the day after. The exodus took 2 lunar months, about 59 days, to travel from Goshen in Egypt to the base of the real Mount Sinai. Exodus 19:1. I explained the Exodus in Volume 3 in detail. When was the first 2 stone tablets created? Well, like I mentioned earlier, during that assembly, well, let me say first this. The reason why they had to give him some kind of laws. Remember, the Torah wasn't given until a year plus later. What happened was he had got thousands or tens of thousands of newly freed slaves. If you didn't give them some kind of laws or rules to go by, you'd have chaos within a short period of time. Now, Moses gives you the clues for that in chapter 18. His father-in-law Jethro comes to him, and you see that Moses is trying to basically settle disputes between various tribes and people and stuff like that. And the father said, you're going to exhaust yourself. And he suggests to appoint people over thousands and hundreds and then tens. In other words, you need help. You can't do that. Well, evidently God thought the same thing also. So, and then God tells them, get the people ready, assemble them, will wash their clothing, and come in the day of, or 2 days or 3 days, I forgot. You'll wind up getting this assembly where the leadership would see the fire and God speaks. And anyway, that's what happened. Chapters 21 to 22 is a bunch of ordinances. But that, I think, is all that was on those first set of tablets were the 10 Commandments, or really 12. Remember, the Torah wasn't written yet. They gave him 10 rules to go by. We don't know how many ordinances appear in chapter 21, 2 was also there, but it certainly wasn't 304,805 symbols or letters. Now, for some reason, and I don't know why didn't the scholars remember this, that you basically have 2 different documents? That's what I don't understand. So here, the same thing out of this. God gives them the stone commandments, 10 rules, but that's in the beginning when they first arrived there. Same thing here. 1 year later, and the Lord said unto Moses, hewn these two tablets of stone like unto the first. We got 2 sets. And I will write upon the tables the words that were on the first. Now the reason, you're going to find out who broke the first set of tablets, and that wasn't Moses. And anyway, the reason is the Torah wasn't written. The surface story of the Torah wasn't written yet. It's going to take Moses about 30 or 40 years to do that. So the question is what happened? You still need rules that these primitive former slaves could go by, or they'd be killing each other, and be chaos. Ask any cop or police detective, if people didn't have any laws, what would the streets look like? It'd be something like San Francisco or LA or parts of New York. So anyway, that's what happened. Okay, this is what happened a year later, when they were just about to well, not leave yet. It was the anniversary. They got done with making the ark, the tabernacle, which is the tilt-up building, candlestand, bread stand, everything. And God told them on the first day of the new year, lunar new year, they're going to sanctify Aaron and his two older sons, Nadab and Abihu, to be priests of the congregation. And that is really the Feast of Tabernacles. Now it's considered Sukkot, but it's not. Originally it was Feast of Tabernacles, and was 7 days long. It was commemorating finishing all this construction and getting it to work. But what happened, Leviticus 10:1, Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, and they came forth fire before the Lord and devoured them, and they died before the Lord. And Aaron held his peace. So, what's happening here? Aaron's two older sons basically got electrocuted. What the legends say is that two fine strings of fire hit both their noses and killed them. So I think I know what happened. They take these pans of hot coals with creating smoke, and they held it and they stood up in front of the ark. And, you know, high voltage, the closest thing to them looking up, because the thing was about 8 feet up, would be their nose. That's the closest thing for a spark to go to ground, and it fried them, killed them both. Now, that's important for what you're going to see what happens, what Moses says later, which is kind of interesting. Okay, so the sequence of it, you have 7 days in the beginning of the year. You have 14 days, Passover was observed. 15th day, Sukkot was observed for 7 days. So brings us to September 7th. Sometime before then, before Sukkot, the Ephraimites were the workmen of the camp, and they took down the tabernacle and everything else that was on top of the hill, because they were going to pack their bags and leave. They brought everything down to the Ephraimite encampment. This is the encampment. Now, you see this thing here? When I first saw it, I couldn't figure out why it was in the middle of this 900-foot long flat area where the Ephraimites were. And let me go on to the next video. This is a close-up of it. I think they brought the ark to here. Again, the stones were rectangular in outline with dirt on top of it. Remember, you're looking at something that's 3,310 or 20 years old. It's not going to be pristine. None of it's going to be. But that's what it looked like. That was probably where this was, on top of this, in a tent, closed down, because Aaron did not want anybody to see it or to focus on it. So Moses came out on this 47th day of the second year and carrying two very different tablets, not made of stone. The legends say they were bluish in color, you could see through them, and they could be rolled up, but they were a very hard substance. If you are an extremely highly advanced civilization and you have a program or a document that you want to make sure will last forever, you're going to put it on something not like stone that cracks, it decays, something like a polycarbonate that's so hard, but it's functional. I think that's what it is. So it comes down, see what his brother did. Now, why did his brother do this? He just lost his two older sons, got killed by this unseen God of Moses, and he's no longer the top dog because they're not worshiping Hathor any longer. Moses, this is where it is. There's an embankment that's about 20 feet up. There's a bunch of these fire pits. I think they use them for when the men were working at the top of Sinai, they can find their way back. Anyway, I took the thing apart, the words, and that's what this is all about. And basically, I knew he wouldn't break it. It didn't make any sense for Moses to break anything that God just gave you. It would be insane. I don't think he would have done it. So this is another example where they broke the words differently to put the blame on Moses rather than on Aaron. So when you break it, this is my new translation. And when he approached towards the encampment, he saw near the calf and performing music, he delayed, grew hot with anger, wrath of Moses, dropped from hand the tablets, and he sat down to see below the moment. You couldn't break this stuff if you wanted to. He just dropped them. Sat where I showed you, one of these places, saw what his stupid brother did. Then he later went down and destroyed the golden calf. By the way, the story that 3,000 Levites were killed, 3,000 times 24.136 gives you, divide by 12, gives you 6,034, the number of chapters and verses in the Torah. The book is entirely a code book. You'll see another example. Aaron had possession of the first two tablets. Remember, everything was taken down from the top of the hill down to the Ephraimite encampment. He had possession of it. Not only did he build the golden calf, oh no, he destroyed the two tablets that Moses, unseen God, created. He wanted to make sure people would never see it. So he's the one who broke the tablets, not Moses. They still need some laws for the people, like I explained. So God then says, okay, hew 2 more stone tablets like the first, come up and I'll replace them. Because otherwise he's got chaos going on real soon. So Moses took the 2 hewn tablets and went up in the morning into the mountain. It wasn't on top, it was in the mountain. If it was the mountain, Mount Sinai at the tip of Sinai Peninsula, you think an 81-year-old man can climb 8,700-foot pinnacle in one day, in one morning? Of course not. So you know the story that they create is a lie. Video Series 4, after they leave Sinai, Mount Sinai, and they go south, about 3 days. I covered it in Video Series 4, Part 5C. It is the most coded, secret story in the Torah. There's not one more coded than that. Ironically, it has to do with an easy way of surviving this cataclysm. Since we're not going there this trip, I won't have to bother covering it. But this Korah's rebellion happened after they got to that area. Some strange things happened. Korah rose up in face of Moses with certain of the children of Israel, 250 men, and there were princes of the congregation. In other words, they're the leadership of all the other tribes. Elect assembly, men of renown. And they assembled themselves together against Moses and against Aaron, and said unto them. So, gave his grievances. Now Korah is here. He's an Ephraimite, so he can't say that this whole family never gave up the gold to free the other 11 tribes, which then became 10 tribes. So he couldn't say that. But he goes on further, and when Moses heard, he fell on his face. So this is really, I think Korah was about the same age as Moses. Maybe his son or grandson went and followed Moses, maybe even carried the 2 stone tablets, and followed him into the cave. And deeper in the cave, I think they saw the grain sacks loaded with gold. Now, I think Korah wanted a piece of the action. He couldn't admit that the Ephraimites, because he's one, never gave up the gold to free the other 11 tribes. Because they kill them. They probably kill, the other 10 surviving tribes would kill all of the Ephraimites. And I think that's the problem Moses was faced with writing this surface story. Anyway, again, it's all a code book. 250 times 24.136, 6,034 number of chapters and verses in the Torah. So maybe it's trying to say they're rebelling against God. Really, they're rebelling against Aaron and Moses. But we know why. Korah wants to seek the priesthood also. Now, this part's funny. Remember how Aaron's 2 older sons died? Do this. Take your censer, that's a pan, Korah and all his company, and put fire thereon, and put incense upon them before the Lord tomorrow. And it shall be that the man who the Lord chooses, he shall be holy, and ye too upon you, ye sons of Levi, which they're not. So he's setting them up to basically die like Aaron's 2 older sons died. He's not telling him what he has to do. Instead, he winds up saying, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed them up. That's convenient. In other words, as I said, it's the most coded story. It's in video series 7. And it's the number of things that happen that just doesn't happen in normal time and space. Later, number 16:5, a fire came down from the sky and killed another 250 men who offered incense in front of the tent of meeting. 250, 500 times that. Hey, 12,068. What an amazing thing. The next day, the killing isn't over with. I'm not too sure how many people did die. I think the first 250 did get killed. The next day, the congregation again came to the entrance of the tent of meeting and challenged Moses because 250 of their leaders had been killed the previous day. It's certainly probably their grandfather, their father of the tribes. A plague had already started by the time Aaron went among the people. Scriptures say that 14,700 people had died that fast. Well, supposedly they were eating quail meat or something like that. Nobody dies of food poisoning that fast. Total number of days in 40 years plus 90 days is 14,700. So that's really what he's telling you here. It's number of days in 40 years and 90 days. And it's probably 90 days after they come out of this thing to go into the promised land, but that's a guess on my part. Now you know what's really happening. Now, either he or his son or grandson followed Moses in, saw the evidence about the gold. He wanted to become part of the priest, which means he have access to the gold. It may be as simple as that. That's probably really what it is. Finally, we're near the end. As I mentioned earlier, I'm planning another expedition to the Sinai late this year. The last time I went, it was towards the end of November, a little bit in December. I expect it's going to be about 2 weeks. I decided to offer some interested people and fans of my YouTube channel on the expedition. I estimate it may cost as much as $10,000 US per person for 2 weeks out in the desert. That does not include the airfare and visa permits from the Egyptian embassy or consulate. The fees, I think, the last time was like 40 or 50 bucks. It wasn't very much. In order to estimate the cost for the expedition, I need to know roughly how many people have the money and want to go. I don't know if we are going to need permits from the Tourism and Antiquities Board. I'm corresponding with them now, and how much that will cost. Last time I think the permit was like $600, but that was a lot. It was over 24 years ago. There is the cost of the tour company, supply jeeps, some tents, protection, that's important. Translators, drivers, ample bottle of water. Foundation is going to have to calculate the amount of food, tools, and other supplies needed for the expedition. All of this is dependent on how many people willing to go. The agenda I'm going to do is the first day is traveling to the hill and then putting up the camp. That takes up the rest of the day. The second day will be a tour of all the altars except Abraham's altar. We're not digging that up. I have shown in my volume 3, 4, and video 10. Abraham's altar will be left for professional archaeologists to work on, not us. You can take as many pictures and videos of the site. There'll be no disturbing of any of the altars, and you can't take any souvenirs home. You can't take anything out of it. Third day will be examining the hill and what makes it geologically different. It's very unique. I will also start digging a cistern for the Bedouins at the base of the hill. This will enable them to collect some rainwater. In the digging process, you never know what you're going to find. In the North Valley where we were, there was a hole already, and I found a fish vertebrae. It carbon-14 dated about 500 or 1,000 years ago. But very interesting. You never know what you find when you dig into the earth. If most of the people must be in good health and be able to dig, the desert is not a place for women because of bathroom issues, and only portable showers with very limited water. That's the problem, is the water supply. Now, Ella reaches north and we can make water runs back. The foundation will bring portable toilets and showers and also the food. But we have to dig our own latrines and garbage dumps. I do not want to discourage women, but know what you'll be dealing with, what you're getting into. Everyone who comes must have read volumes 3 and 4. Volume 2 would be helpful, but not required. They should also have watched my YouTube videos 8 through 11. I want people to know beforehand what they're looking at. It's important. I don't want to have to, I'll ask questions when I'm there, but we're going to be really too busy to deal with trying to teach people. I want people to already know what they're looking at. Anyway, if you're interested in the expedition and you want to go, send it to research@dieholdfoundation.com. If you want to be on the foundation's mailing list, it's info@dieholdfoundation.com. Any contributions towards this, if you don't want to go but you want to contribute to it, you can send it to research@dieholdfoundation. And it's all tax deductible, unlike Peridon and some of the others where it's they're the foundation and the person receiving the money is not. We are a 501c3 public science foundation, so it's tax deductible. Well, I hope you learned something, and if you have the time and the money, and a very unique expedition. It'll be the first time somebody outside the small group that went last time has seen it, and hopefully this is going to become public.